Hey friends, I'm Daniel Nesbitt, and this is Designing a Sans Serif Typeface. I decided to take a little bit of time off last week. If you're watching this video as it's coming out, as you all know, there's been a lot going on in the world, and it honestly didn't really feel right to put out a typeface video last week. It just seemed that there were a lot more important voices that needed to be heard, and I think it really helped for me as well to take some time to listen to what was being heard and continue to listen to what's being heard. And yeah, so it's difficult, but I think it's a conversation that we all need to have with ourselves and with those around us. So I hope you're finding this video well, and I guess we'll get started. It's the only way I really know how to do this right now. So if you did watch the video from a couple weeks ago, you'll note that we did make a little bit of progress with the heavier weight. We went through and we got a lot of the characters that had straight lines taken care of, really with a few exceptions. And today I'm probably going to go through and continue working on those and just making those look a little bit more the way we want. So on my list was the M, and I believe we were doing the offset function here. So we'll see. Looks like it's keeping all my settings here, fingers crossed. So we're going to go ahead and effectively today is just going to be doing exactly what we've been doing before, where we can just kind of see how things are coming along. The other thing that I'm going to do, which I had been doing this on another typeface, little side project thing that I was working on, and then I realized I could do it here, is to show interpolations. Now right now I don't have any interpolations. I'm just working between two masters, which is totally fine. But what I like about this is that it actually shows an outline of the first master in the background here. And for me, that's a little bit helpful because it's really showing me how this letter is changing from its original form, so I can keep that in mind as I'm moving these points around here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of keep plugging away at this a little bit. Of course, being out of the loop for a couple weeks, it ends up kind of messing me up a little bit with where I was at, but I think we'll get there. So just to keep this moving along here, you might see me go through and do a few things where you're like, hey, wait a minute. So if you do, now you know why. Just trying to remember where I was at. So, already we're looking, I think, fairly good across the top there. I'm pretty happy with that. Similar to before, I believe it was with the N, one of the things that I had done was switched it so that it's sloped more inwards on the thicker weight especially, rather than having kind of that sharp indent there. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do that with the M as well. Because honestly, the more I think about it, it made sense. So we're just going to go ahead, kind of knock those points out there a little bit, and it helps as these pieces taper in here a little bit. The other thing that I'm going to go do is bump those up a little bit as well, just trying to thin some spaces out a little bit. Now I do have this car wreck going on here, for lack of better words, I guess. I mean, one thing that I like when I'm looking at this is I do like how this point here, that width is going on. The thing is I don't know if that is exactly where it's supposed to be in terms of being centered. That's kind of a guess here as to whether or not I'm even close to that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of back some of these pieces off a little bit. I mean, this is really where I'm just going to have to get creative here a little bit. I think it's about, well, was that close? Not too far off, only a couple points off. Wow. Haven't lost all my magic touches yet. I mean, being 2 points away, how mad can you be at that? So I'm just going to do that, just make it a little bit easier to kind of measure my distances here. So 140 to there, 129 to there. So that means if I move that 5 points over, that should get me to approximately 145. I'll take that. 124. Did I go the wrong way? Let's try that again. 135, and yeah, 135 about. We'll take it. So what I'm going to do is we'll take those 2 points. We will line those up with that box there that I temporarily had. Bump those out of the way. Then I'm going to take this bottom point here and just move it over so that it meets up with that point there. And it looks like we've got an M. And honestly, that's a pretty good M. So there we go. Now, one thing I suppose I could jump back in here real quick and say is, because this is a small character, I'm just going to go back down to these smaller weights here. I could consider, and I might consider, just bringing this down a little bit more. Just so at those smaller sizes, and this may be super, super tiny on your screen, but just to kind of open that up a little bit. The larger M, I don't think that's an issue at all, really. But on the smaller one, it does kind of put up a little bit of a fuss there. So I think I'm going to go with that. Now, one thing that I might do, as I say that, is later on you might find me adjusting that again. So don't hold me to it that that's the final option there, but we're close. So we're just going to keep rocking and rolling here and carry on with the next one. So the next one that I had on my list to do here was the V. Again, we'll do the offset there to get things rolling. I think for this one, I think I set up my O, and we're just going to roll with that. Now the trick is unlike the M that I was just on, it's not just a matter of dragging these straight down because we don't want to upset the way I've got this angle set up and going for me here. The difficult part sometimes is I've even caught myself doing this. It's so easy to just go, oh yeah, I can just, make it shorter or whatever. But that's really where you start to squash your stroke widths and get them out of order and everything. So it's one of those things that's pretty crucial to keep in mind. Now the other thing that I want to keep in mind as well is that I want to taper in my strokes a little bit here. Now, on one side that works fine because I can move this point in and it wasn't going to affect this point over here. Problem is that if actually, before I even say anything, because I'm probably going to say something stupid, turns out I can. Basic geometry there. But you see where that's kind of going. So jumping back and forth there, it seems to work out. Maybe it is still a little bit heavy. This is where I have to kind of weigh how much of a taper I want versus kind of that empty space there. I mean, if I go too far, make sure I just grab the point that I want, then it might start to look like these strokes really start to taper in a little bit. And if you didn't see me, I was actually gesturing with my hands, which, I don't have a video camera on me when I do these things. And I mean, honestly, I've always thought that's been for the better, but you'll just have to trust me. But you just want to be careful because what you're looking for is that visual weight, but you don't want it to go too far the other way where then it starts to look like two triangles with the pointy ends down, meeting at a point there. I think that's going to be okay though. So jumping in, now that we know that actually, we can jump over to the W. And this is pretty much going to be the same as the first verse as soon as I get the right menu there. Again, it's just going to be bringing our points down. And actually a trick here, since so many of these are going to be going in the right direction anyway, I'm actually going to just kind of bulk grab some of these points. I don't necessarily need to do one stem at a time just because These are all more or less the same shape, size, all that kind of stuff anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and do all that and make sure that I get all these points lined up here. Sometimes I got to zoom in, and then we'll go back the other way, do the same. And I mean, that gets us pretty close. Again, I'm just going to use the O for my side bearings for now, and similar to the V before, it's just a matter of going in, and I think I did 20 units in is what I did. We'll see where that goes. I mean, it's looking right. So the tough part with the W now is these two middle ones. So here, and I'm actually going to put up the V for a comparison here. I mean, that actually probably could go even a lot further now that I look at it. So the tough part is determining... Well, I guess I was going to say the tough part is determining how far this really needs to go. But then the tough part turned out to be grabbing the actual thing. But it might actually benefit from going back a little bit more even. And this is because, as you probably saw there, my stroke angle is actually, it's more vertical. It's not as sloped as much. So I think that kind of helps a little bit. And then I'm going to just kind of go back a little bit as well with those. Might have to go a third. Oops. The other thing that I'm doing too, which you may have guessed, is that I'm also trying to make this point here look approximately like the same point there. Not saying that it's going to totally get there, but we're going to try. And I think one of my points got knocked off here. Let me just take a look at that real quick. I am just going to go through and make this outer one the same. I was pretty close anyway. It's not the exact, which is fine. Because what that helps with then, if my eyes aren't deceiving me too much, is we get kind of a better shape going on there. And then actually, I think just bumping that in a little bit more does that. Well then, there we go. So now we got more of that even shape. So where I was going to go with this is, I'm at a point where I like how this part and this part looks, but obviously this part looks super, super thick. And I mean, first I'm just going to try that, which helps a little, but it still feels pretty thick. So we're going to bump that in a little bit more. That might be better. The difficulty too is I want to be careful how thin these middle strokes are getting. I don't want it to look like the outer ones are super, super thick and then you get some super, super thin middle strokes. The other thing that I want to keep in mind too, which kind of makes this a balancing act, is this one here should also be a little bit thicker anyway. So what I'm going to try and do is just see if something like that works. So it's not going to be a perfect mirror, but I mean, what I'm aiming for is it kind of goes thick, thin, thick, thin as far as the stroke weight goes. And I know that I don't really have much contrast to begin with in this font, so I can get by with a tiny amount of that. But I think that works. I mean, it looks halfway decent to me anyway. Let's go through and clean up that side bearing while we're there and get rid of that warning. Since we did those two, I guess the next natural progression would be the A. And I'm going to go through and just bump that one out as well. I think for this one, I was doing O as my side bearings, so we'll just go ahead and pop those in. I'm going to use Command R. I really should get in the habit of using more shortcuts in this app. I do in every other app except Glyphs. I don't know or understand why I do that, but I do. So anyway, just going through, and I mean, some of this is going to get repetitive a little bit. It's there's kind of some basics that we go through, but then each letter, almost each letter, tends to find its nuances as well. So with the A, again, we're effectively going to do what we did on the bottom of the W and the V, where I'm going to go through and just thin out, if I can grab it. There we go. Do that trick. So just kind of thin out the top a little bit, which opens up that sum. If you're paying attention to my little preview down at the bottom, I'm going to here, which is super, super tiny. That's obviously still not enough. One thing that I think I'm going to do to combat that a little bit is actually reduce the stroke width of the crossbar here. And the reason that I'm doing that is I think that the two vertical strokes here, I think those can carry most of the weight of the letter, and so I really don't mind too much if this crossbar takes out a little bit of the weight. So we'll just kind of see how far I can push that. But I mean, it looks decent, I guess. Again, one of those things where I could keep kind of going back and forth a little bit on it, but I mean, it's working. It feels like a bold version of the A that I just made, so I think we can go ahead and roll with that. Now, I know we did the O, and we talked about that a little bit. I think just to kind of give a little bit of a warm-up into some of these others here, I'm going to go through and do the C. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to offset the curve, and seems like this is going to become a running joke, me forgetting to put side bearings in, but I'm also going to pop up the O here too and just kind of use this as a reference, because like I said before when I did the O, obviously the C is going to do a lot of weird stuff with the overshoots here, which we don't want. Because really the overshoots should only be, as a refresher, I'm going to say it's for everybody who's watching, but really it's for me. We've got about 20 points of overshoot there. So I want to get this to be 20 points of overshoot, and right now it's like, what is that, 86 or something crazy like that. I don't mind the width too much. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep that much width there. But I think to start, what I'm going to do is we're just going to focus on kind of bringing everything inward. I think, and I should say too, for the outer portions of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab those 3 points, and my only focus is lining up because I'm going in the vertical direction here, so I'm only going to worry about the top point there. I'm going to go ahead and do the same on the bottom. So we'll get those lined up. Beautiful. And then just kind of figuring this out from here. So, I mean, it's just tempting, and I might even just go for it here just to copy the handles of the O and just start from there. And that might be okay for that side. Now for this point here, I'm going to have to bring these in a bit more. And again, I'm not worrying about the inside just yet. But I am going to just kind of tweak my way around. Make sure I'm grabbing the right piece there. And I'm just going to do my best to get this curve to line up with that curve of the O, because this is kind of playing a geometric flavor here. So a little back and forth. Whoops, as I realized I edited the wrong piece. So try again. So I mean, that gets us pretty close. I'm not going for something super technical here, but that gets us there. So we've at least got the height on the outside. That does mess up the inside, that does mess up the weight, which is fine. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take the center of the O, just do my best to line that up in the points there. And then just like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and just move all these points in. And you know, since it seemed to work last time, I'm just going to go ahead and line those points up. I'm going to line those points up and those points up. So that gets us to that point. For the inside here, I'm going to do my best to keep this angle, but make sure that that point is resting on that inner circle that we just brought in. And then once we've done that, oops, again, make sure I grab the right point. And so probably what I need to do here, I'm thinking most of my focus is actually going to be on this handle here. And again, this isn't going to be 100% perfect, and that's fine. But if I remove that, that looks pretty close. So let's refresh the side bearings there. And so now if we just kind of jump back and forth a little bit, it feels like a thicker C. It does get a tad wider, which I'm fine with. The other thing too that I have to remember here, yep, I did it. So similar to things like, I'm trying to think like with the E or whatever, where we did kind of that optical illusion a little bit, or even the S. The S would probably be a good example, where the top part, the top curve is going to be smaller than the bottom curve on an S, just to kind of give it some weight here. We need to kind of remind ourselves to do the same thing with the C. So I just bumped that in a little bit, maybe like, I don't know, 7 or 10 points or whatever. But it's enough that you'll see when I flip this around now, it's a tiny bit. But what happens is it makes the C look upright. It's a goofy a goofy thing, but at least that way it doesn't look like it could just go rolling off in the distance. So we'll go with that. Let's see, it's still yelling at me about a side bearing. There we go. So, good warm-up. One other thing that we can do too is with the Q. And for this, what I'm going to do is we're actually going to put the O next to it here because it's the same shape there. And actually one thing that I was going to say that we can do here is I'm actually going to go through before I forget and delete that. If you press Command-Shift-C on your keyboard and we type in a capital letter O here, this goes through and just puts an instance of the O in there. So then you just got the crossbar there for the O. And the benefit to this, and I'm going to undo this in a moment, but if I do that on the O, it updates it everywhere. Kind of a simple trick there. So if you're playing along and we switch over to the heavyweight, it ends up breaking. Ah, so close. Do I have to put it in? Ah, there we go. Glyphs outsmarting me yet again. So I guess we'll just go through, we'll offset that. And so this is where we're going to run into some trouble because there's not a whole lot of space there to really make this. Oops, don't want to edit the O. Pro tip, you can double click on that and edit the source character, which is not what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to go through. I am going to get this as close as I can to the original height to some level. I'm actually probably going to bump that out a little bit more. So here's the thing. I can't leave this the whole width here. That's not really going to look right for a couple of reasons. The thing with a Q, and especially the Q here, is that part of what gives it that visual distinction is that this, I mean, you can see this, and when you get down to these lower sizes here, it looks like a muddled mess. And I mean, this might be on me a little bit, that I probably should have considered this a little bit more. I don't think I'm going to find a perfect solution here at this moment. And unfortunately, this might be one where I just end up leaving it as is. I'm also going to go through and set my side bearings properly here. I do like how this is shaped here. And so what I'm also considering as well is when we go through and we start interpolating this, and really if this becomes a variable font, I kind of have to think about how it's going to grow from the lightweight to the heavyweight and back. And right now this might be a situation where I break off this at a point and maybe do something different for a super heavyweight. For example, if I grab the right character, maybe I just go to a point like this. That could be an option. And this is something that we can discuss a little bit later in the process as well, because there's a few different tips and tricks there for that. But it is something that I'm going to have to deal with, and that I don't think I'm going to be able to solve necessarily in this episode. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to leave that. So I think for today, for getting back into the saddle a little bit, I think this was a pretty good go here, just kind of wrapping up some of the angular characters, obviously getting the M wrapped up as well, and then diving into the rounder letters. And I think this gives us a good platform to work on. Probably next week, maybe take a look at things like the P, R, D, and G, since those have some similarities. Potentially the B if we've got enough time. I mean, really what I'd like to point out, though, is you're really seeing the power of the offset tool and how quickly that you can really build heavier weight glyphs. And honestly, it's that tool is why I enjoy starting out with the lighter weights. It's easier for my mind to think in positive numbers. So to be able to just kind of set an arbitrary offset in both the X and Y directions really helps me build these characters a little bit. And then, I mean, honestly, you're seeing with some minimal tweaking, it actually gets us pretty close to where we want to be. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe. It's really been fun watching this channel really start to grow, seeing some of the comments that are being left as well. I know there's been a few in since the last episode that I had it in my notes to get to, but I didn't today. Just wanted to get going with creating some more type here, but know that I'm reading them, I'm seeing them, and at some point, particularly if it's got any good info that I just want to highlight or share, that I'll be doing that. And as well, if you haven't visited my website already, nis.bet, a few people have been reaching out via the contact form as well, just asking any additional questions if you're not comfortable asking anything in the comments section. That is certainly open as well. I've had some great conversations with a number of awesome people, answering anything about glyphs, about the type design process as far as I know it, or even just, if you need an extra set of eyes looking over a typeface, happy to do that as well. So with that, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode.